Um, Good evening, everybody. We are back with our virtual Meet the Candidates session. I am joined by our legislative chairman, Dr. George Woodbury. Thanks for staying with us, Dr. Woodbury. We are going into hour two now, so appreciate your resilience during all this, and thanks for sticking with us. We're joined now by another candidate from District 97, Mr. Allan Creasy. Allan, thanks for joining us tonight.
An absolute pleasure to be here.
Just like all the other candidates that we have and will interview, we've got three prepared questions for you, and then we'll allow some time at the end for you to touch on any other topics that you want to touch on before we move on. So having said that, let's get into it. Allan, Governor Lee recently issued Executive Order number 15. Among the provisions in that order included the ability for nurse practitioners to practice with autonomy. What's your position on the expansion of scope of practice for non-physician providers such as nurse practitioners and physician assistants?
Well, I believe when you're discussing healthcare, you want the absolute most qualified person to be providing the healthcare, and obviously that is a physician. Now, I'm going to bring some nuance to this and say that the issue we have two issues really affecting Tennessee right now. Of course, the pandemic of COVID-19, but also with the lack of Medicaid expansion and the more than a dozen hospital closures, and with a sort of unfortunately a brain drain of qualified physicians, leaving Tennessee. So if the question is, do I support the executive order in regards of COVID? Yes. In regards of when we move past this moment in time, when we hopefully are able to expand Medicaid in the state of Tennessee and stop the closure of rural hospitals across the state, then I believe that we should move back to a physician-led model.
All right, great. So moving right on into the next question, there's a lot of difficult decisions being made today that force, business owners, parents, policymakers, really all of us to balance our personal physical health and maybe even the health of our community with economic health and that desire to get back to business, a phrase that we hear quite often. Can you talk about your thought process if you're elected when you're faced with those challenges of balancing, healthcare versus economy and that type of thought process?
I think it speaks to a philosophical idea of immediate gratification. In our society, whether it be in business or in politics, we have this idea to measure everything by this year's profit margin or even by this quarter. And there's so much pressure pushed upon those of us running for office and those who are elected to office to provide immediate results. In the case of COVID-19, I believe that we need to look at the long-term effects of how we are dealing with this crisis. And so when you're talking about business, and when you're specifically talking about the restaurant industry or businesses that are being very heavily affected by this issue, I think that the knee-jerk reaction is to reopen too quickly and ignore the advice of qualified persons in the medical field. And to me, while that might provide a short-term sense of relief towards business owners, it makes us less safe, and it ensures that this pandemic is more likely to continue. So I support the advice of medical professionals in the way that we should be dealing with this pandemic. And I'm proudly endorsed by Dr. Jeff Warren And when it comes to addressing this issue, I abide very much by the ideas of the City Councilman, Dr. Warren.
Okay. Thank you, Allan. So next question, kind of staying along the economic lines again. Inevitably, our state's going to have some hard decisions to make when it comes to addressing the economic challenges from the revenue decreases that we'll likely see. So cuts are going to be inevitable. Can you talk about how you prioritize cuts and whether or not you would cut healthcare spending?
Well, I think the idea of cutting healthcare or education are absolutely inane and really counterproductive to pushing forward the progress of the state. Healthcare and education are things that should never be touched and should never be cut. We do have a rainy day fund, I believe. Oh shoot! I think we just put 200 and something around the realms of like 300 million in that rainy day fund. I can't imagine what other instance in time what we were waiting for that could be a greater crisis than we are facing today. So when it comes to healthcare, not only do I believe that we should make no cuts, but I will be an advocate for expanding Medicaid in the state of Tennessee. And I think I'm sure you all know, I will be an advocate, and I'm very proud to say, you know, we had a state Senate, a Republican Senate sponsor, a Republican House sponsor of that bill. I believe we can move forward with the passage of Medicaid expansion. And that's mainly because right now it's, I think, between 64 and 67% of Tennesseans support it. But also, I am someone who has quite a bit of experience in persuading those who perhaps are not philosophically inclined to support Medicaid expansion. I think the biggest sale, the biggest way I persuaded those to vote for me that were across the aisle, so to speak, in 2018, I was able to attain quite a bit of Republican support, is by pointing out that on average, Tennesseans spend about 9% more on monthly health insurance premiums than states who chose to expand Medicaid. I think that is the absolute best selling point for Medicaid expansion, and I think that is it will be a huge way of bettering the healthcare community in the state of Tennessee.
Okay, great. So, Allan, that concludes our questions. We've got a little bit of time left, so feel free if you want to expand on any healthcare issues, or if you want to touch on other issues, or say, a few comments in general. The time is yours.
When it comes to healthcare, like I stated before, 67% of Tennesseans support it, and it comes down to an underlying issue in which we're here tonight, myself and my fellow primary opponents, because we are in one of the very few purple state house districts in Tennessee. We are one of the few places where you cannot win if you only put a blue flag out or only put a red flag out. And to me, that leads to better government. When I ran in 2018, I not only knocked on the doors, and my campaign knocked on about 20,000 doors. I did about 4,000 personally, of those who are philosophically inclined to vote for my party. But I talked to thousands of persons who normally vote across the aisle. In fact, I'm proud to say that in Bartlett, I had about 12 yards where it was my name right next to Marsha Blackburn's. That's a very unusual idea. But I think a huge reason why we're not seeing Medicaid expansion is because districts are so incredibly gerrymandered. The vast majority of state legislators in the state of Tennessee aren't worried about winning or losing in November. They're worried about winning or losing in August. And they're ignoring the 35 to 40% of their constituency who is not philosophically inclined to their party. So if you're a Republican in the state of Tennessee right now, and the vast majority of voters in August do not support Medicaid expansion, even though the majority of your overall district support Medicaid expansion, you are going to be philosophically inclined to keep your primary voters happy. So I think philosophically, the way that we change the state, have better governance, is to ensure that we have a better drawing of districts based on the 2020 census moving into 2022. And so that's an incredibly important issue for me, and an incredibly important issue for this campaign.
All right. Great, Allan. Thank you for spending some time with us tonight. Thanks for your candor in answering those questions. We wish you luck on the campaign trail. And other than that, again, thanks for joining us and have a good evening.
Thank you, and God bless.
All right. Take care. All right. We've got those that are joining us. We have a pretty substantial dinner break here. We'll be back at 8 p.m. with Senator Paul Rose from Senate District 32. So stay tuned and join us back at about 8 p.m. Thank you.